I think, because we live in a society where we have this power structure and it's about money and it's about being on the top, when we start to fight, there's this idea that you're trying to get everything. We want to go to work. We like the place. We want to make everything better. We just want a seat at the table. That's all.
This is Tsehaitu.
Yeah, so my name is Tsehaitu Abye. I'm an Ethiopian American woman, a big sister from Philadelphia and Hawaii. I am a organizer for One Fair Wage right now, and also a business owner, a creative, a lover of many things.
This season has had a lot of tips and tools to dealing with interpersonal or personal issues at work. Conflict resolution, advocating for yourself with your boss, etc. But what do you do if you're having a repeated issue at your workplace and none of these things are helping? What if it's not just you experiencing the same issue over and over again? Then it might be time for you to try to make systemic change and work together with your coworkers to make it happen. You're listening to Copper and Heat, the podcast exploring the unspoken rules and traditions of restaurants. I'm Kadjo Suna. This is Pre-Shift, our third season, getting you tips, tools, and resources to navigate the challenges of working in hospitality. In this Pre-Shift, we're talking about collective action, organizing, and unions in the hospitality industry. Let's start at the beginning. First off, what is a union? What does organizing a union even mean?
At its core, organizing a union means coming together with your coworkers to address systematic issues that have gone on for a really long time and trying to change them.
This is Jess.
Okay, my name is Jess Kadjo. I am a lead labor representative with a union that represents city workers in Oakland, California. And that can be your pay. That can be that you're not paid well, right? That you are paid minimum wage or not paid a living wage. It could be certain working conditions that you see. It can be different injustices that you see in terms of how people are treated, whether it be based on their age or based on their race or based on their socioeconomic class. It can be lots of different things that bring people together, but it's a group of coworkers coming to do it together and to act in unison rather than going to their boss individually to try to negotiate their own deal for themselves.
When you show your employer that everyone is organized and every new person they hire is organized and knows what their rights are and respects themselves and is not willing to sell someone out, whatever whatever it may be, when that employer sees that, that's fierce. It's respect and it's a demand. And so getting to the point of being able to make collective demands, that's what organizing is. It's critical that, first of all, restaurant workers understand that they have power. And I think that's like the first part of anything you do with anybody you're organizing. You just have to start conversations about what does power look like? And how do I reimagine this space, this environment that I go into every day, no matter where I am, different, where I have power?
The structures that we have in place are to keep those people as far down on the totem pole as possible. So that's what this organizing is about, elevating their members' stories and having them tell it themselves. You're not going to see an organizer being the one who's being interviewed. You're going to see the woman who actually does the work be the person interviewed, and that makes a difference. And it makes a difference in terms of the political education and also showing what is important to the union, what's important to the movement. This is a movement of Black and Latina women. This is a movement of immigrant women. This is a movement that says that we should have equity in the workplace at all levels. And that is not a lot to ask. These are not crazy things. These are regular things that we should have, and we should expect more from our employers, especially if they're raking in the coins because of the work we do.
At the core, unions are about organizing everyone's voices to make a change and harnessing the power of numbers to fight for your collective rights. For example, we talked earlier in the season about negotiating a pay raise with your boss. Maybe you're denied that raise, and no matter what you did during the negotiation, it just didn't work. But you really feel you deserve it, whether it's because it's been a couple years since your last raise or because you've taken on more responsibility. Maybe you start talking to your coworkers and they have all had similar experiences of not getting pay raises, and everyone is underpaid. This is one of the classic issues that workers organize around. However, organizing is really hard in any industry, but it does pose an even greater challenge in restaurants.
I think it's really hard to work together because we have like a really deep-rooted individualistic society. That's just a really American way. Like, as long as you do well, right? If you do well, maybe you can bring other people up, but it's not like we do well together. And that's a function of capitalism. But I really do think that that's a function of like supposed American exceptionalism, that what makes our country great is that anybody can make it and anybody can do it. And they're usually like those stories, those kind of myths that we tell ourselves, is that person got there alone. We're not really thinking of all the people who made this possible, because we don't really have that as like a, in my opinion, I don't think we have that as a true American value. And so it's even harder. So if you think in a place like a restaurant, right, some people might say there's a lot of turnover and that could be hard, but I actually don't think turnover is really the problem. I think that it's all about you getting what you deserve. So if you're a server, some restaurants pool their tips, some restaurants don't. You know, some restaurants pull tips and include back of house, some restaurants don't. It's super subjective based on the place, based on the owner, based on the people who work there. Unless you're in an organizing campaign where you really start to challenge your own preconceptions of like why you're there, what you're doing, something that's actively like pushing you to think differently, there's no reason why you would necessarily be aligning your interests with the dishwasher in the back of house, you know? Like, why would you do that? Or even with your, like, the other server, if you guys are helping each other out that day on the floor or whatever, at the end of the day, it's about, like, making your coin. Organizing is really hard. Working at a nonprofit is really hard. You have to constantly be sacrificing to try to move an agenda, because that agenda is not about making the most amount of money. That agenda is about having equity across the board. And equity across the board is anti-individualism. And if individualism is so tied to the American tradition, that's going to be really hard to untangle.
The systems that the restaurant industry is built on, cheap labor, the tipping system, generally low wages, sometimes makes it really hard to think about anything else other than just trying to make enough money to pay your bills. Besides that, the idea of meritocracy, just work hard and you too can make it to the top, adds even more to this individualistic idea. But unionizing and organizing goes completely against some of those ideals.
And so I think that's why organizing is difficult, but also why it's necessary, because it challenges that and kind of breaks down this barrier that, like, you're different than I am, and we actually do have similar interests. We all have dreams. We all have things we're trying to accomplish, and we are all doing this job for a reason. A work scene doesn't necessarily lend itself to exploring those reasons.
Something else that comes up a lot in restaurants is this idea of family. And according to Jess, this is a really dangerous idea that actually keeps workers from working toward better conditions.
This veneer of this perfect family starts to kind of fade away because it's not real. It's not based in reality. It also helps uphold bad practices because we're so afraid of addressing what's actually going on. We don't want anything to jeopardize this idea of family, that we don't actually tackle the problems. It's, again, going back to being conflict averse. Restaurants is super conflict averse in terms of dealing with the tensions. Let's just get through service, right? And the other thing is that you're in such a high intensity environment. The goal is just to make it through the night. We actually don't have time to deal with all the problems. Like, can you just, buck up and take it? And so if you're having to buck up and take it every single day, like, that makes it really hard. And so even if people do get to the point where they're organizing, they're trying to get their coworkers to make something different, Oftentimes, it's much easier for owners to just go ahead and promote that person so that the loud person is taken care of, and maybe their issue is taken care of. They're the loudest person. If they were complaining about whatever it is, you can kind of like handle that and ask them, hey, I'm going to promote you so you can talk to your coworkers and make this go away. Because it's not just the cost of actually making changes, it's the time. Like, restaurants operate on time, right? You need to be able to get as much product out in the least amount of time possible. I don't think people are saying, oh my God, I don't want to address problems. But at the end of the day, how much money am I going to lose if I actually get rid of this person who is an amazing chef, but is a terrible boss?
One of the biggest challenges is that the types of business in the hospitality space have such different models. Organizing in a large corporation like a college cafeteria looks much different than organizing for small businesses where there just isn't as much money involved.
I think it's really difficult to win in single operators because you don't have that much at the end of this. The entire business model is not meant to make sense, really. I mean, it's the reason why it's hard to get into it, and then it's hard to stay into it. It's the reason why so many people fail at it, because it's almost designed for you to fail. When we were organizing the cafeteria I worked at, we were about 200 people. So that's pretty small. Like most casinos have several hundred, depending on the size of the place. But we had 200. And that took us 2.5 years to organize 200 people. Black people, a large Chinese immigrant population, a large Latino population. People all are coming from different backgrounds, etc. That was difficult, but it's still possible because it was Aramark that we were fighting. We're able to kind of like do different pressure points because at the end of the day, we're dealing with a large corporation. It's a small little area, but it's a large corporation who's running the show versus if it was just a single operator. And so when you're thinking of like where you're going to organize, right? What shop are you going to organize? Where do you have the best chance to actually win? Organizing is hard no matter what. No matter where you're doing it, it's going to be difficult. So you have to have a pot of gold at the end of it that makes it worth it for both the union and for the workers, because you're asking people to make major sacrifices, to do things that they've never done before, to kind of like face conflict, which a lot of people are conflict diverse. A lot of people do not want to ruffle feathers. The entire way, like our work structure in the United States is based on, let's just be thankful that we have this, no matter how much you've done to get to where you are, it's always, I'm just thankful to have it. So if that's the mindset that you are bred to believe in, you're not going to think that you're owed anything more, right? Or that you deserve anything more. It's just like, let's just keep the status quo. And organizing really goes up against all that and says, no, there are certain things that we have a right to. Like if the employer is making a certain amount of money, we have a right to share in that fairly. We have a right for back of house to not be so far behind front of house. Those kinds of things. And it's just much harder in restaurants than it is. And it's hard all across food and beverage, honestly, but it's much harder in restaurants than it would be in like a hotel or a casino because they're just a much larger corporation. And so the pot at the end of the rainbow is going to be much larger. I don't want to be mixing metaphors all over the place, but I think you get what I'm saying.
So it's incredibly challenging to unionize in the restaurant industry, especially in small independent restaurants. And sometimes that might not be the best way to go. Unions are not the only ways to organize and use collective action to make systemic change.
The path of organizing for a union is very specific versus organizing workers across a nation in different states. Or even organizing, community organizing, right? Or even break it down to political organizing. What does that mean? You're working in the political space. So in terms of the misconceptions, I don't think a lot of people know much about organizing in general. And so when it comes to restaurant organizing, in a way, it's like community organizing.
On a large scale, the state of Nevada is actually a great example of how organizing can not only help workers in their workplace, but can help drive social and political change.
So Unite Here is a union that represents food service workers, hotel workers, hospitality, all kinds of hospitality workers. Folks who make the food for airplanes are represented by Unite Here, right? So lots of places where you're fed in a hotel, plane, university cafeteria, casino, you can be served by a Unite Here member. And at the culinary, obviously Vegas is all downtown is casinos, right? And so what they've done is taken what is just usually a regular old union and turned it into truly like the political juggernaut of Nevada. They've done that by organizing their members, educating their members on why it's important to be involved in politics. Because like I said before, lots of unions only just focus on getting good contracts for their members. And, how can we make sure that you get your cost of living increases? How can we make sure that you get how can we make sure that you have health insurance? How can we make sure that you have a good pension? Those are kind of like the core details, and maybe some language issues here and there, but for the most part, those are like the mainstays of contracts. And then there are other unions that focus beyond that do all that stuff, but also do the political work, do the political education at a local level, at a state level, at a national level. And so the culinary has really invested in that, like educated their members of the importance of being invested in politics so that they are able to kind of punch above their weight and be able to organize not just their own membership, but improve the quality of life for all Nevadans.
So not only are unions about helping you within your workplace, they're about making overall societal changes. And unions get a bad rap as being bad for small businesses, but the goal of unions is really to make things better for everyone. And an example of that is pushing for bigger infrastructural changes that will ultimately help small businesses.
It's easier to take away from the employee who makes $8 or $15 and say that that's too much than it is to tackle the real problem, which is the fact that individual employers are having to make life and death assessments for their employees. All the pressure falls on the employer, and when the pressure falls on them, they go down rather than up because it's easier. I mean, it takes money. Like, you're trying to run your restaurant. You didn't get into this to understand public policy. You got into this because you're passionate about food or you're passionate about a certain cuisine. So asking someone to now become an expert at healthcare legislation and, labor legislation, asking them to become experts at all these things, it almost feels insurmountable. You know what I mean? It's just a lot. We're asking a lot of people. And honestly, as workers, we then have to get educated ourselves because otherwise it's going to happen to us. So I believe that the solution is actually having public systems that support our economy rather than having systems that keep our economy in the balance. Our economy is super vulnerable, and COVID has highlighted that. I believe we have a society that makes people think that if they just work hard and they protect themselves and they follow the rules, that they can be a millionaire too. They can be a billionaire too. So we have this weird thing where we kind of protect the interest of the people who have benefited from how gross our system is and therefore made money off of it. There's no way that you can have a homelessness crisis like we have here in the Bay Area and have a Jeff Bezos and that be okay. There's no system that is actually working if that same person has made more money from a global pandemic, than they had before. While you have small restaurants that have existed for 30 years closing their doors permanently.
Many folks that were working in the service industry, or who still are, who we were building power with and organizing, were able to share their stories with different news outlets or journalists. And just being able to share your experience and what you've gone through, and in some cases actually naming the place that you worked at and having to talk that through publicly, not only does it strengthen you in an intangible way, but it lets your employer know, if they read that article, that I'm here, that you're here. You know, that you may want to come back to work. You want to be there, and letting them know that you're bold enough to say it. And in some ways, some people might feel that they've been blacklisted in some way, but I do know we have dozens of employers that care about strong staff and people and want those types of people on their team. I can say that for a fact, because at the end of the day, no one's organizing workers to run around amok and complain all day and be angry. We're looking for accountability, effectiveness, efficiency, happy. We want to be vibrant, because the work of the service industry, of the restaurant industry, is to create memories, right? And we want our employees and our staff to be happy and to be healthy so that they can create great memories. That's sustainable.
This is just barely scratching the surface of organizing in unions. So head over to our Instagram page and follow us. We'll be doing an IG Live with Tsehaitu next Monday, so we can chat more about organizing in your workplace. Even if you're listening to this well after we post the episode, the recording is still on our IGTV at Copper and Heat. Tsehaitu is doing some really awesome work with One Fair Wage, so check them out. Jess also has her own podcast called Leap Year, which you can check out wherever you get your podcast, and we've linked to it in the show notes. We're also linking to a bunch more resources about unionizing and organizing specifically for restaurant folks in the show notes. Please check them out so you can make change, either in your workplace or help push for change in the restaurant industry. If you haven't already done it, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. Then you can keep up with all of our new episode releases throughout the season. Even better, share this with a friend. Copper and Heat is a member of the One Star Podcast Network, the first podcast network dedicated to representing voices and stories from the service industry, with shows created by restaurant industry workers. Check out our website, onestarpodcastnetwork.com, to learn more about the other shows. Pre-Shift, the third season of Copper and Heat, is produced by me, Kadjo Osuna. Our story editor is Rachel Palmer. Our sound engineer and composer is Ricardo Osuna. Thanks so much for listening.